I'm scared of that test. I don't know. That one is kind of like no format or something, this year. That's all. The other one is okay, I think.
Well, okay, so we were just talking about the first year qualifier.
Oh, yeah.
That was yesterday, and it's again tomorrow, and then it's again on Friday, for 4 hours each day. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to get started with the time conversation. So why don't you start the time conversation?
I actually don't know how long this meeting is supposed to last, so give me a hint and then I'll be happy.
So I'm not sure, like how, so basically ask the question.
Okay.
We have the room reserved for 2 hours.
Okay. So we have this room reserved for 2 hours. It may or may not take all of that time. Is that time frame okay with everybody? Does anybody need to leave early for anything?
It's okay for me.
See nods. Are those yes I need to leave early nods? Or no, that's okay nods.
2 hours is okay for me.
Okay.
Colin, what about for you?
2 hours for this?
Well, we're asking.
2 hours maximum.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, and then that was the opening time conversation in which we ask, if the time still works for everybody. And then we go into the wanted conversation, usually in collaboration meetings. And so I'm going to do that today, where what I want from the meeting is to hear James give you guys an overview of the collaboration process.
First it was just him, then it was two of them. Now it's the whole meeting.
No. Well, it's the whole world.
Well, you told me about that.
So I'm curious if any of you guys have other wants for this onboarding session. Are there specific questions that you have that you want to make sure that we get to in the hour or hour and a half or 2 hours for this meeting? So it's a question, really, of the three of you, besides James, but also of James too. So of the four of you, and the five of you talking to. Any specific things that you'd like to cover? Okay, well, if there are questions that come up, this is a conversation, so you can feel free to ask the questions. But you had something?
No. I looked through this and it's fine. I'm coming in here kind of blind, so I don't know totally what to expect. My one want is to do this effectively.
Okay, great. Well, so it's mostly going to be you. So now I'm going to turn it over to James. Let's have a brief introduction of each other. So I'm Eric Vance, I'm the director of LISA.
I'm Benedict Kazuzuru from Tanzania, School University of Agriculture, Department of Statistics and Mathematics.
Right. So Dr. Kazuzuru is visiting for 5.5 months. Although we're just going to say it's 6 months. 6 months. Stephen?
Hey, I'm Stephen Hurwitz. I'm an undergrad at Virginia Tech and I'm majoring in statistics.
Great.
I'm James Anderson. This is my first year in the master's program here. And I was also an undergraduate statistics major.
Yeah. My name is Han. I'm the first year master from Vietnam.
From where?
Vietnam.
I'm Tanya Pruitt. I'm the LISA administrative specialist, and I am down the hall, not from Stephen, but from the rest of you, my offices. And Stephen, can you hear us okay?
Yep, yeah, I think I can hear it going pretty well.
Okay, good.
Cool. So now we'll turn it over to James for an introduction or an overview of kind of what you learned in the class, which is the basis for being a statistical collaborator in LISA.
I focused more on what the individual things that we did, and some of my comments, but the individual things that we did as opposed to more of what I took away.
Okay.
Some of it, some of
Okay.
it, but, okay, so this is in roughly chronological order, but there are a number of things that kind of permeated throughout the entire semester. So we started off the semester getting to know each other. We did a little wiki formatting experiment, which again, that carried through. That ended up being a big part of the course. And so for that first assignment, we just posted various information about ourselves, got used to the kind of format. I think I should explain that. Is that important
No.
for them to?
No, you can do the more, less details.
So the primary, that was just kind of an introductory thing that prepared us for the rest of the semester. The primary theme, I would say, for the entire course, and these themes definitely carry throughout, were the power process and kind of the meeting structure. Do you want me to go into those various things?
Yes, but maybe you can do an overview first, like you're doing, and then go into the power process.
Okay, so we went through the power process and the meeting structure, and that was probably the real focus of the class throughout. Then we learned about something called power posing, very effective. We did a fair amount of role play, which sometimes effective, sometimes less effective. We watched a video series that was called the Janster series.
Janice Durr.
Janister.
Yeah, we could nickname it the Janster.
Well, I never actually saw it written. I only heard it, and that's what I caught. Those I thought were actually quite informative. They showed a contrast between. They were obviously quite staged, but a contrast between poor collaboration techniques and better collaboration techniques. We did weekly or bi-weekly test type things on readings that we did called IRATs and TRATs. The I being for individual, T for team. Those are pretty good to keep you kind of up to date on things, because we did a lot of discussion based on the readings. And I like the IRAT TRAT format, because if you didn't know something or remember something, right after you forgot it, you got to discuss it with your teammates. Another thing that we did in the beginning that I really liked was a LISA sit-in, where each of us contacted a LISA Collaborator, and then we went and we sat in on the meeting. Jotted down notes, good things, bad things. I thought that was particularly useful. We had to initiate that with a professional email, which is another theme that kept coming up. We initiated a lot of things with professional emails. I believe another big theme that we came upon a little later but hit on very often was paraphrasing or summarizing what the client had said frequently, and there was a key phrase that we got to by the end of the semester that what we're really supposed to be looking for is the word exactly. I always believed in the idea of summarizing and paraphrasing, great idea, but the exactly gives you a nice clear goal. I like that. We had a few guest speakers. Jonathan Stallings, one of our recent graduates, and
Her name was Alex Hanlon from University of Pennsylvania Nursing School.
They were quite interesting. We were able to ask them questions about their experiences. Jonathan worked in LISA for quite a long time. At the middle of the semester and at the end of the semester, we did team reflections, both assigning actually numeric ratings to our teammates, as well as giving them constructive feedback and positive comments. I liked that. One of the things I liked about that was that we had a set amount of points. There was a very explicit way that you had to divide the points, which was kind of a pain, but I think it was a good system. Then again, at the middle of the semester, we did a midterm project, which involved initiating with the client and basically having the first meeting. And in with that, we learned about different styles of presentations, what styles are particularly weak, specifically in PowerPoint, and what can make them stronger. I thought that was a pretty good exercise. After we finished the Janister series, we started watching video clips of actual LISA meetings and commenting on those, the good, the bad, and such like that. Also, after each of our midterm presentations was filmed, and we received those back to review. We started off the second half of the semester with an assignment involving explaining statistical terms to non-statistician. This was a very useful one, comes up all the time. There's a large emphasis on using examples, which is just great because you basically can't do it without examples. Kind of along the same vein, we discussed asking effective questions. That was a little bit lighter. We only did that very briefly, but I think that was a valuable part, and there could be more in there. I think we learned about this earlier, but we learned about something called type 3 errors, which is very important to collaborators. If you're familiar with type 1 and type 2 errors, those are just, basic statistics has error in it. The type 3 error is when you answer a question that hasn't been asked of you. You just answer the wrong question. Towards the end of the semester, we practiced doing the work phase of the power process. I'll come back to that in 1 second. Kind of as a group, we did a short little exercise in class. We talked a bit about manuscripts, co-authorships, and did some case studies based around those two ideas, when it's appropriate to get a co-authorship, when it's not appropriate to get a co-authorship, things like that. And finally, we had the final. That was a variety of things. I'm here. Some people had more meetings with clients. We all practiced giving feedback on Doug Zahn's book, which I'll bring that back around. Doug Zahn wrote the book literally on the power process.
Yeah, so so that's the overview.
So that's basically the overview of everything that happened.
Okay.
Did I miss anything?
What about, you didn't mention QQQ.
That
You
is
think
part
it's
of the meeting structure. Yeah, I have that. It's very second on the list. Don't you worry.
Okay, so that was a general, broad overview. But now specifically, James will talk about the power process, because that's something that you guys will be using in LISA collaboration meetings, and also the QQQ process.
And they fit together very nicely. So the power process is a great process for structuring anything, actually. I found that our class kind of followed that process, everything. So it stands for preparing. Well, I'll start outside the meeting. There's preparing and reflecting on either end. And then inside the meeting, there's opening the meeting, working in the meeting, and ending the meeting. And so then you prepare, open, work, and then reflect. And that ties in with the QQQ process. The QQQ process refers to talking about a problem qualitatively, answering it quantitatively, and then bringing that numeric answer back to a qualitative, a qualitative answer that somebody could just, read in a sentence. I feel like that really aligns with the power process. The O directly corresponds to the first Q you open. Theoretically, you're not supposed to discuss almost any statistics in that open process. You're just supposed to nail down what the person's research project is, what their research goals are, what their scientific questions are, why they're doing what they're doing. And I think that really addresses that first qualitative aspect of the QQQ process. Then as you move into work, the work is completely centered around the statistics. That's where you actually do any analysis that might be appropriate. Totally lines up with the quantitative second Q. And then finally, when you end the meeting, not quite as much ending the meeting, more involves just wrapping up the meeting and preparing for the next one. But if you kind of take it as at the very end, the last meeting, at the very end of the last meeting, you might boil your numbers down to be something intelligible, and that would bring you back into the qualitative realm of the last Q.
Excuse me. Do you have to ask something at the end, or as the experience we could ask?
Say that, what's your question again? Say that again.
I just wanted you to clarify the power process
Okay.
and whether the QQ process is within the power process. This is what I was wondering.
Right, so I'd say the power process is a way to structure a meeting. You've got the 5 stages of a collaboration meeting. And it's on page 7 of the guide.
And Stephen, if you want the guide, it's on the website in the resources section.
Okay, yeah, you can access that online.
I forgot to tell you about that beforehand, so. Yeah,
It's through yesterday.
Great.
Yeah, I don't think they're explicitly related. That's just how I kind of saw them superimposed on one another. We learned about them at the same time, but I'm pretty sure they came from 2 separate places.
Yes. So QQQ came from me, power came from Doug's line. So this, the power process, as James was saying, is this 5 steps. And basically every meeting should have all 5 of these steps. But then like an initial meeting will be more heavy on the open than on the work. A follow-up meeting will be heavier on the work part or the end than on the open. And then QQQ is a way to approach every applied statistical problem. So for every statistics problem, the first Q is qualitative. What is the actual research question? And then, are there data? If there are data, how are the data collected? Or if there aren't data, then you say, well, what kind of data do we need to answer the research question? This is all qualitative thinking. And then once you've defined what the research question is, once you understand what the data are, then you can go into the second Q, which is quantitative. And so this is, it's analyzing data and getting results. So it's the quantitative part of statistics that we're all very familiar with. But then you're not done. Once you get some output in R or SPSS, that's not finished. You might be finished with that quantitative part, but then there's a third step, which is again qualitative. So that's why we call it qualitative, quantitative, qualitative. And that last qualitative step is basically figuring out what is the answer, how does the statistics answer that original question? And also, how can this be implemented? So not only like how does it answer the question, but how can the client really use it to advance their research? Or if you're in business, how can this engineer really use these statistical techniques and these statistical solutions, to manufacture better products in their factory? And so that last step is the qualitative, we call it Q3, qualitative. How does this statistics answer the original question, and how do we implement the solution? And then, so James, why don't you again summarize like how QQQ fits in with power?
Okay, so like I said at the very beginning, the power process, in my opinion, is just a very general process that can be applied to almost any meeting or interaction. As Dr. Vance just explained, QQQ is pretty specific to our context, the statistical context. So kind of how I see it is the 3 Qs kind of semi-go in the place of the 3 middle letters of the power process. You prepare and reflect outside of the meeting, or maybe a little bit in the meeting, but mainly outside the meeting. And then when you open the meeting, you're supposed to discuss research goals and scientific questions, and really make sure you understand those in order to avoid type 3 errors, which I mentioned. Once you have that all squared away in your brain, you haven't really touched any numbers yet. You've only made an effort to understand the problem in a qualitative nature. Then you move on to the work portion of the meeting. It's when you would do analysis, pull out your software, play with data, and that's a much more quantitative side. The quantitative only gets 1 Q, and work only gets the W, but you do end up spending a lot of time on those particular elements. Not that you don't spend a lot of time on the other ones, but you end up spending a lot of time on the W and the middle Q. But then once you're done with those, once you feel like you have a good answer, you've gotten output from your software, most people, even other statisticians, would not be particularly happy if you just handed them some code and a little junky R output.
A table of p-values.
A table of p-values, yeah. So then it's also our job to, possibly working with the client, possibly of our own initiative, but to bring it back to a real-world context, either just by explaining it to the client if that's all they need, or figuring out how it can be implemented if they're working on something, or if you need to actually write a statistical method section for a co-authorship or something like that. You need to bring it back out of the abstract numerical realm back into the land of the people who understand words.
Okay, so for right now, do any of you guys have questions that have come up? Do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Benedict?
Right. I don't have a
You're
question.
like, where do I start?
I'm not trying to. I'm interested with the QQ. Is this double Q or triple Q?
Triple Q.
Triple Q.
2 of the Q's stand for the same thing though,
Yeah.
but triple Q.
Yeah, so we say QQQ, but we write it like this: Q1, Q2, Q3. But it's too hard to say Q1, Q2, Q3. We just say QQQ.
Yeah. That step sounds to me as the most important, at least from my experience.
Uh-huh.
That the client will come to you So the first thing is to understand what he wants, to clearly understand his problem, and try to figure out his problem in terms of the statistics which you know, and to see whether it can fit into the statistical methods. So that would necessitate you to know, as you say, the type of data which is available, or the type of data which will be collected to suit his statistical objectives. And possibly, if possible, to restate the statistical, the study purpose to meet the statistical methods, without, of course, removing the real intent of the problem. So that's just my view on that.
I feel like we spent a good amount of our time in a similar way. We spent a good amount of the time in the class working on the open section, because Dr. Grant, I think by the end of the class, we all appreciate it, and Dr. Grant's really emphasized that, understanding the question is, hopefully after we leave this program, we'll all be able to do all sorts of statistical analysis fairly easily. But understanding the question is really when you can have the shortfalls. So we ended up spending a lot of time on the open section on the first Q, and just that whole idea of making sure you know what's going on.
So are you planning on going through something next, or what?
I can go through things next if you'd like me to. I have some suggestions also if you just want those in private or.
Okay, we'll take those later, the suggestions later. But what I'd like you to do is to go through and try to explain in your own words the specifics of each step of the power process. And you can use that. So we're going from page 7 on this collaborator's guide to the student.
All right. So review the collaboration request form. We never actually did that. That's, I think, a LISA specific thing. They get the forms and that tells them what people want. So preparing, we didn't actually spend a terrible amount of time in class learning how to prepare. I mean, I don't know what exactly we would have done. But I think I like this middle bullet, arrive at the meeting room early and make sure it's prepared. I like to make sure I have my water bottle full of water. That really, if you can learn about the client's problem beforehand, through a request form, it's great to try to be as familiar with that as possible. But for me, it's really this middle bullet, just making sure that you're comfortable in the room. I guess that kind of goes over into the second to last bullet too. But being comfortable in the room, having a clean room, not being sweaty from running up 4 flights of stairs and busting into the room a minute before it starts. Just that kind of stuff. Just to get the meeting off, take the right first step, and then everything else should go better, hopefully.
So my questions could be awkward. Are these request forms given before we meet the client?
So the way the request form works, since you guys haven't seen it, the client fills out a form on our website. It gets sent to me and Dr. Grants and Dr. Frank. Over the summer, I'll review the form and see who I think would be the best match for the project. So based on your interests, like let's say Hong really loves chemistry. I don't know if that's true, but if she does, I'll try to make sure she gets chemistry projects and not survey-based projects and that sort of thing. And based on what stats is going to be needed. So if it's really high-level stats, I'm not going to give it to a first-year grad student and like overwhelm them. They might be an associate on the project, to help the older student. After that, you guys will get an email that says, and it's also sent to the client, these are the people that you're going to be working with. So you're working with Kazazuru and James. Contact them to set up a meeting. At the bottom of that email, it's got everything the client has submitted to us. And maybe the client did a really good job and explained exactly what they want. Maybe they did a terrible job and they just said, I need to know how many people I need for my experiment. And then they didn't tell you anything about their experiment. So we get both ends of the spectrum. You might get really detailed requests that tell you a lot about the project so you can be prepared. You might get something that's not so detailed. And that way, you know that. And you can contact the client beforehand to talk to them about, what you might need, or what, just go straight into the meeting and talk to them there.
And one thing we did discuss about the preparing is, in the context of LISA, sometimes people will change what they wanted from the request form. So until you actually do come face to face with the person, there's only so much that you can do to get a head start.
Right, so before you continue, we're going to mix this power process with the LISA process. So so you and the client got an email that said for the client should contact these two statisticians. So we always put 2 statistical collaborators on every project. There's a lead and an associate. And so there are 2 roles. And the role for the lead one of the roles for the lead is to schedule the meeting. So the client is supposed to email both the lead and the associate collaborator with their available times. But if they don't, especially if they don't do it by 48 hours, but for me, if they haven't done it in 2 hours, I email the client and say, hey, we're your statistical collaborators. We're available to meet, at these times. And then, it sometimes goes back and forth, to figure out the time. But Tanya, will you talk more about the details of specifically who's supposed to do what?
Specifically, we say the lead collaborator is supposed to schedule the meetings. We don't get really specific, requirements-wise. If the associate wants to send an email to both the lead and the client with their available times, that's okay. If they're more comfortable sending it just to the lead, I'm available these times just to the lead, and then the lead can send the overall email that says, we are available to meet at these times to the client. Which one works best for you? And then the client is supposed to send an email back to both of you guys to say, Tuesday at 1 works best for me. Or, none of these times work for me, how about these times? So it's whichever you're more comfortable with as an associate. Do you want to send it just to the lead and then let the lead send the email to the client, or do you want to send it both? That's okay too.
Yeah, so the lead and the associate figure out what times they can both meet. And then the lead, communicates that with the client and figures out when the time should be, and then schedules the meeting on our Google Calendar. So we have a meeting room in Old Security Building. It's called 103 Old Security Building. And there's a Google Calendar to reserve that room. And until we get kicked out, we still have a meeting room in Sandy Hall, in 312 Sandy Hall. That also has a Google Calendar. And so the details of how to use the calendar, you can ask Tanya later about that.
The one thing I want to say about that, be sure if you're making a reservation on the Google Calendar that you're reserving it to the room you want and not your personal calendar. So when you make a reservation, it's got a drop down that says what calendar do you want to put this on. Make sure you put it on the room calendar and not your personal. Because if you just put it on your personal, you haven't made a reservation. You've made an appointment on your calendar, but no one else can see it. And we've seen that be a big problem. And if you have trouble with that, stop by and I can help you with it.
Okay, so the lead and the associate and the client, they've scheduled the meeting. and they've asked, sometimes you can ask for them to send you the data beforehand, or maybe you might even have a follow-up question, or you might just say, I'll see you on Tuesday. So then you get to the meeting a little bit early, just so you're prepared. And then what happens?
And then the client arrives on time. And then that is when, like we did at the beginning of this meeting, we have both the time and wanted conversation right off the bat. That kind of sets the stage for the structure of the entire meeting. Time conversation, real simple, just make sure that everybody knows what's going on. The wanted conversation is more of a structuring tool. And that's where you really get at what the client wants, not just overall, but that's what do they want out of this specific meeting? What do they want to accomplish today? And that doesn't go one way. It's also you tell the client what you'd like to accomplish overall and specifically within the meeting. This says the first goal is give the client a quick overview of the structure of the meeting.
This is something that I added to the power process.
This isn't on yours, Stephen, yet. I added it to the one they see, but I haven't put it up there, so listen carefully.
The one time I had a real wanted conversation, or the most recent real wanted conversation I had, I actually incorporated that into my wants, and I found that worked very well. That I want the meeting to go like this. That's my want for this meeting, and so I feel like those two can be conveniently put together. So the client's telling you what they want, It's important to listen to them, but not really listen to them, and make sure you keep extracting. Because lots of times, whether they put something wrong on their request form, or they just don't know enough about statistics, they're going to tell you their project, and hopefully they know exactly what they want. But most of the time, they're going to be at least a little bit off on what they really want from you. And so it's our job to say, to just pull that out of them. Say, is there anything else you're interested in? Anything else you want? Anything else we can do for you? Just really pulling that core question out of them.
Yeah, and a key thing is to focus on what they want scientifically. So not what they want statistically. So if they say, I want to figure out how to calculate the number of degrees of freedom when I do a whatever, a chi-square test for independence.
Yeah, that's actually, lots of times they will open with that I want some sort of statistical procedure. But based on what we discussed before, we're not in the work phase, we're not in the Q2 phase. Dr. Vance is exactly right. There's going to be plenty of time, we'll spend plenty of time working on the nitpicky details of the statistics, but if they don't even need to do a t-test or a chi-square test or an f-test, and they're talking about degrees of freedom, you're just way off, and you want to get off that track as early as possible. Once you do have all that stuff sorted out, and you have kind of you think a good idea of what they really do want from you, then you decide and I guess tell them if you're willing and able to do those things. Most of the time, not a big deal, unless they ask you to do something unethical or just ask you to do an entire project for them. Something extreme. Those can happen in your own head most of the time.
So, going more into details about the one conversation, is we literally ask them, what would you like to accomplish today? And then they say something and we paraphrase it, like we summarize. Okay, so you would like to figure out how to design your study so that you can determine whether or not this drug is effective. And they say like, yes. And then you ask, okay, is there anything else that you'd like to to accomplish? Like, well, yeah, and then I actually want to know specifically like how many patients I need for my study. Like, okay, so we'll try to do a power calculation to figure out like how many patients for the type of study that you're gonna need. Is there anything else? And then like, well, yeah, also, I'm meeting with my advisor tomorrow, and I'd like to just figure out one sentence to describe like the overall research. So okay, so you're meeting with your advisor tomorrow, and he's gonna be asking you about this, and you would just like to work with me to figure out like one sentence to explain everything to him. It's like, yes, exactly. Okay.
Also, part of the wanted conversation, easily overlooked, fairly important, is the overall time frame for the project. You know, when do you want this done by? End of the week, end of the semester, 2 years makes a big difference.
Yes. So the wanted conversation is tricky because it really is on 2 time frames. The first one is specifically right now at this meeting. So I usually go directly from the open conversation to the wanted conversation and say, we have this meeting room scheduled for an hour. Does that still work for you? And the answer is yes. And then I have another appointment in an hour and a half, so I could spend an extra 15 minutes, if necessary, to finish off things with this meeting. Would it work for you to go over for an extra 15 minutes? And then they say, well, no, because I have a meeting over on the other side of campus. I need to leave by 12:30. Okay, great. So 12:30 will be our end time. So in the remaining, 58 minutes, what would you like to accomplish today? And that's how I asked it. This is what I say. And then they say, well, I'd like to understand my study. Okay, is there anything else? Number of patients. Okay, is there anything else? One sentence summary. Okay, is there anything else? No, that's it. And then you come up with a plan for the meeting, which will be, okay, well, we'll start off by, asking more questions about your research to figure out what the best study design will be. And then, if we have enough time, we'll try to do a power calculation. I'll show you how to do a power calculation to figure out the number of patients you'll need. And then if we have enough time, we'll try to get that one sentence summary that you can use for your advisor tomorrow. But we might not have enough time in the next 55 minutes. Does that sound like a good plan? Yes. Okay, so that's like the timeline just for the meeting. But then you also, when you're designing this, trying to help them design the study, you're going to ask, overall, what are your goals? Like, this is a 3-year study to do this, and this is my PhD dissertation, or I'm graduating in 2 months and I need to get a paper, so the timeline is 2 months. So that it's complicated to figure out what are the wants and the times just for today, and then the wants and times for the whole project.
Yeah, particularly in the open phase, but I find that applies to the entire power process. You can look at the entire collaboration time, or each individual meeting. The power process can be applied to both, particularly the open phase.
Right. So this power process can be applied on different timescales, and we mostly talk about the timescale of a particular meeting, of an individual meeting. But you can apply it to the whole project itself. You could apply it to your whole life if you wanted to.
Yeah, kindergarten.
Yes.
You're a compelling meeting leader. You were looking at me when you were doing that example, and I was like, yeah, that's a great meeting plan. Not even my project, not even a real project possibly. That's totally on board.
Good, cool. And we want your clients to feel the same way. Because a lot of clients, they come into LISA and they're nervous. They're not great in statistics. That's one of the reasons they're in LISA. They're coming to LISA. They've been spending a lot of time on their research, and they're very focused on the research, but they're concerned that they're not going to be able to do their research because of their lack of ability in statistics. So they're nervous. And every client is different, but in many clients, they like to have structure for the meeting. They like to know what to expect. And so to tell them just at the very beginning of what to expect is really a key thing. So this is also part of the open, where you can, James says he likes to do this as part of the wanted conversation, in that, so why don't you give an example of a wanted conversation starting with your wants?
So it's important, I'm just going to make this point. Lots of times clients do like the structure, but they kind of think they already know what the structure is going to be, and sometimes they'll just run in with, this is what I want, this is what we're going to do, okay, here it is. So it's important to get kind of the first word in, and that's why I like to combine this into the owner conversation. So you have the time conversation, and then immediately following that you say, now I want to kind of figure out what we want from this meeting. First, I want, if it's the first meeting, I want to learn exactly what your research goals are and scientific questions are. I really want to understand your project. And then, maybe start working on it if we have time. What would you like to accomplish today? And just right there, they know exactly what you're trying to do with their information.
Right, so that's a great way to give them the overview of the meeting, and your wants in that wanted conversation. What I like to do is to have a greeting, like, hi, how are you? Yeah, come on, sit down. In this meeting, we're going to discuss like how much time you have available, and then we're going to discuss your wants for the meeting, and then we're going to transition into learning more about the background of your research project and your overall timeline for the project, because that's really helpful for us to understand that context, to kind of help you answer your specific research questions. And then, after I have understood enough about your project so that you say that I understand exactly, then we'll move into kind of what we call the work phase. And this work phase will be, maybe we'll open up your data set and actually look through it and try to analyze it there. But we're going to make sure to save enough time at the end, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, to summarize what we've accomplished and to answer any last minute questions, and then to come up with a plan for the next meeting. And maybe we'll be able to summarize everything today, or maybe we're going to have to schedule a second meeting for next week or for a couple weeks from now. So that's my plan for this meeting. So let me start by asking you, how much time do you have available for this meeting? Does it work, to go until 12 o'clock? Would it work to go 15 minutes extra? Yes. You heard my wants for the meeting. What would you like to accomplish today? And so did you time it?
I did, 1:05.
And from beginning to now? Or?
Until you started the wanted.
Okay, so I did this overview in 1 minute and 5 seconds. Good, thank you. So you can do that, right? It might take you 2 minutes, or you might even shorten it to 30 seconds. But the point is, you can do it quickly. And it can give the client an understanding of what you're going to do. And it can serve as a reminder for yourself of, all right, the power process. Open, the work, and the end.
There are a lot of little parts of the power process, and they're all fairly important. It's easy for them to slip down.
Yes, and so what you're trying to do is, beginning in LISA, is to understand the basics of the power process, to observe the senior collaborators that you're going to be working with, the ones who have more experience in LISA, see what they do, and then when you become the lead collaborator, to try to follow the power process and practice it. And if you mess up, ask your associate to give you like a reminder, like, hey, you forgot the wonder conversation, some kind of signal. Or even come in to the meeting with like a plan, like POWER on your piece of paper, so that you're not going to forget to go through each step. Right, and so then you'll get, maybe eventually, or even very soon, you'll understand the power process and you'll use it, and you'll be able to make modifications and improvements to it. And when that happens, let us know, because this is a work in progress. This is right here. I have changes, right? Changes already. And so we're constantly updating this because we're trying to figure out like the best process for LISA. Okay, now back to James. Oh yeah, so it's, what would you say signifies the end of the open for an initial meeting and the transition to work?
So you keep asking them, what else do you want, what else do you want, what else do you want? When they finally just look at you with a blank and slightly annoyed stare and say, that's it, then you think about the willing and able of the project. And if you decide that you're willing and able to help them, then that's kind of the end of the open phase, and you can move forward into doing it.
Right, so if they have 3 wants, then you say, okay, well let's do 1, 2, and let's do 1, and if we have time we'll do 2, and if we have time we'll do 3. Does that work for you? Yeah, great. So then you transition into work by saying, okay, so to design your study, first, let's back up a little bit, and then let me, give me some background about what your research goals are and why you're trying to do this study in the first place. And so now you're transitioning into the work stage. And James, some more details about work, please.
Okay, so I actually kind of see the overview of the research goals as more part of the open, the transition into the work. But where I think is relatively straightforward. I think the 2 key points here are the second bullet point and the last bullet point. Beyond that, it's really just exactly what we're training. It's just statistics. We're all hopefully familiar with that. But making sure that the client actually understands what you're doing, obviously of the utmost importance. It addresses the first and the last Q, the qualitative aspects. And the last bullet, being respectful, should go without saying, but I think a lot of times if somebody's coming in for statistical help, we might create a kind of dichotomy, like, I know this stuff, you don't know this stuff, let me help you. And you may be trying to do it in a nice way, but it might be patronizing, so just want to avoid that. I think that kind of also addresses the bullet right above that. Don't give an incorrect or a fake, or an incorrect intro to fake your understanding. In my opinion, that's incredibly disrespectful because you're purposely sending them in the wrong direction. But yeah, I think making sure the client actually understands what because you really avoid statistical talk in the open. The client does a lot of the talking, like Dr. Rand said. That's why you do so much summarizing. The client really speaks a lot in the open phase. In the work phase, the collaborator gets a lot more time to speak, and so it could be tempting to just run with it, and you have all these statistical ideas that you've been formulating in the first 20 minutes of the meeting, and then you just want to spill them all out there. But these people are not coming to see how much you know, they're coming for help. And if you don't explain it well, you haven't done an effective job. And I guess making sure people understand what they've come to understand is, again, being respectful of their time and their needs.
Right. And another aspect of what we do in LISA is for these statistical collaboration meetings, we're actually really trying to form a collaboration in which we understand enough of their research to be able to contribute our statistical knowledge to help them answer their research questions. And so, we are adding valuable information to their project. And so we want to have a collaboration, so that means we want to have a collaborative relationship, which means that we want to think of every client who comes in as a potential collaborator, as an equal. So it could be, somebody who doesn't know any statistics, and you might be like, oh, I'm the expert in statistics. That is not what you should be doing. You should be thinking, okay, this is an expert in this field, and I'm an expert in statistics, and together we can, do some really cool research.
Yeah, so I have one question, if you help the client, right, but then how do you know that you're helping the right thing? Is there anyone gonna check your work, or you just be confident in telling that?
Well, I think that's why you have to spend so much time in the open phase on the wanted conversation. Because I don't think there really is anybody, unless you get to the end of the project and the client says, no, this is totally not what I wanted. That's a terrible time to check though. So I think that really comes in the wanted conversation. It's on you to make sure you're doing the right thing before you start to do it, because the client might not know if you're doing the right statistical thing.
So is your question, go ahead.
I think our question, my understanding, it's there's a possibility of you thinking that you're doing the right thing, while in fact you're doing the wrong thing.
Yes, that happens.
Because you can't check yourself. That's what I've got. And that would be kind of an accident, because it shouldn't be expected.
So
Something which would happen once in 100 times. Maybe that's what I got here.
So the question is it about answering the wrong question, or is it about doing the wrong statistics?
Yeah.
Doing the wrong statistics. Okay, so well, there are two main ways about checking about the statistics. One is that there will be another statistician with you. So if you're the associate collaborator and the lead is saying to do something and you think they might be wrong, think about it harder and look it up, and if they're wrong, say something. Say something to them, say something, So the associate collaborator can fix the mistakes of the lead, or the lead can fix the mistakes of the associate. That's the first. The second is that we have weekly LISA meetings in which we discuss statistics. So if you're not sure if you're right, then you talk about it in the weekly meeting, and you explain the project, and then everybody else, and then let people think about what should be done, and then you explain what you did, and they can say, yes, that's right, or this way would be better, or actually that's wrong because of this reason, here's a better answer.
I think that's addressed by the second to last bullet. Whether you just totally made a mistake, which I guess could happen, but I feel like even if you're a little uncertain, just be upfront about that and say, I am pretty sure this is the right thing. I can explain it to you a little bit, but I want to double check before we really get into it, just so that you don't waste effort.
Okay, are there other questions about work, the work phase? Okay, so lead us through the end.
Okay, so the end can come in two different ways. Either you actually finish working, you've completed all the wants that the client had, or you simply just come to the end of the meeting. In either case, as the first bullet says, you actually want to leave some time for this to happen. You don't want to push your work right up to the last minute. The end is really, it's kind of like to prepare for the next meeting almost, in that you discuss what you summarize everything you've already done in the meeting first, and then from there you discuss what you'll do, what the client will do in between meetings, and possibly when another meeting would be if you need one. I like this. The third bullet, determine if each of the wants were addressed, or which of the wants were addressed if you ran out of time, and kind of, that would be, if you only were able to get to half of them, that would be the kind of situation where, you know, maybe you didn't know the answer to one of their research questions, so you say, I'll look this up before our next meeting. If you could, you know, just try to think of any other questions you might have, and maybe we can wrap it up in the next meeting.
Or format your data in this, you know, in this method, like.
Yeah, you ask the client to do, you know, just something to make the next meeting go a little bit better, and then you go forward.
Yeah, so something that we should add to this bullet point about determine if each of the wants were addressed, and then create a plan to address the unmet ones. And this can work really well in combination with a good wanted conversation. And what I mean by a good wanted conversation can literally meaning like go to the whiteboard in the meeting and say, all right, so James, what would you like to accomplish in this meeting? Design study, 2, power calculation, 3, sentence for advisor. Yeah. And so it's on the board, or maybe it's on your piece of paper. But then at the end of the meeting, you can go back and say, okay, so for the one design study, you know, what are you going to be doing? Like, well, okay, we're going to do this, this, and then, you know, for number 2, so we did the power calculation, and it's like, yep, I figured out that we're going to need 35 patients in each arm of the trial. And then the sentence for the advisor, and then the client's like, yep, I'm going to tell my advisor, boom. And then you're like, great, you know, we still have a couple minutes. Was there anything else that you were interested in? No, man, this was a fantastic meeting. All right, well, you know, thanks for coming in, and you know, as we discussed, you're going to be doing this, and I'm going to be doing this, and then we'll set up a second meeting over email. Yeah, great. You know, it was really great to meet you. Yeah, have a good day. Okay, see you. Bye. Then, something that we're going to add right here, another bullet point. Send an email to the client immediately after the meeting saying, hey, it was great to meet you today. As we discussed, you know, we created the study. You're going to need 35 patients per study arm, and you figured out this, you know, that you're going to say this thing. You type it in to your advisor tomorrow. Let me know if you have any other questions, and then you know, after you've done, you're going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and then we'll get back. You're going to email me, and we'll set up a meeting for 2 weeks from today. Period. Sent. You know, just a quick written summary of the meeting, and this is really effective. It's very helpful for yourself, so that you know before the next meeting comes. Be like, oh wait a second, like, I've had 4 different projects since that one. What did we do again? And then you look up, oh yeah, this is what we did. And then it's great for the client, because the client's like, oh shoot, I remember I had that sentence that I was going to tell my advisor, but I forgot it. But then it's like, oh, it's right there in the email. Okay, awesome. And now talk about
The website.
stuff here.
Okay. So,
or hold on, not quite yet. So you can do this email with your associate or with the lead collaborator right there at the end. That should take less than 5 minutes, and then reflect part. And after you've done the reflect part, then we'll go back into website.
So, as I mentioned at the beginning, reflect kind of takes place outside of the meeting, but ideally, if you have an extra minute, just ask the client how they think it went, and that gives you some good feedback, especially if they look disgruntled or you don't think it went particularly well. There's a little bit more incentive to do that if there's issues. But then reflecting just involves exactly what you'd expect. What went well in the meeting, what didn't go well in the meeting, just how you worked together with your co-collaborator. Just noting the pros and the cons of what happened in the meeting, and trying to improve, trying to use those to improve next time. That's an important part.
Right.
Got to use it.
Correct.
At this time, the clients are gone.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
If you can ask them, that's, I guess, good, but that's more for yourself.
Yeah, it's great. I don't do this very often, but when I do, it's always pretty cool to ask the client, was this helpful? And then they might say, oh yeah, especially the thing about this that you said, and you didn't even remember doing that. And so I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll make sure to, say those kinds of things to, my next clients. This reflect is really important because this meeting that you had with the client may not be the only meeting with that client, right? So you might be able to learn something to apply to the next meeting with that client. But certainly, that won't be your only meeting ever, or your only client ever. So you want to spend just a few minutes, getting... You want to...
Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. I was getting a call on my printer somehow. I didn't know that was possible.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really weird. Sorry about that.
Yeah, there's got to be a joke here.
Yeah.
But this won't be your only client ever. So you learn from this meeting that will help you, in years down the road. And the more you do it, the better you'll get, the faster you'll get, the faster you'll become what we call a statistical collaborator, like an effective interdisciplinary collaborative statistician. Okay, now questions and comments.
I personally chose the reflect portion, even though it's very short. I personally chose the reflect portion as the most important part of the process, simply because it, instead of creating just a vicious cycle, it creates an upward spiral. That's how I see it.
Do you have comments, Andrew?
Yeah, maybe on the reflect point. I thought sometimes you could get the answer before you reach the work. The point number 3. As you are talking to the clients, you see him who are smiling, responding to what he really thinks you are doing to him. That can sometimes make you reflect that you are on the right way, and the client is satisfied.
Right. Yeah, so that's another aspect of collaborations, is that there's lots of different things to think about. Well, one of them is thinking about how the client is responding. Are they, looking at you funny? Or are they nodding and like, yeah, and then saying, oh yeah, oh that means this. And so that can help you, if you're able to judge their body language and just reflect on what they're saying and what they're doing, that can help help you guide the rest of the meeting. It can give you really good feedback. And so, a lot of times, if you're unsure, rather than like trying to read their body language, just ask them. Say like, did that make sense to you? Or even, oh wow, yeah, I know it's hard for me to explain principal components analysis. Did that make sense? Like, what did you understand of my explanation? That's even better. It's asking them what they understood. And then having them like explain it back to you and be like, yeah, actually, could you explain it again? Because I didn't understand anything you said. So that could be a good trick. Other comments about the power process?
Like, body language actually is quite important. I kind of forgot that. Because it's very easy, especially in the work process, you kind of move next to each other. It's very easy for the client to just like look at a computer or look at the paper that you're working on and just say, yeah, and you know, you just keep plowing along in that case. But they might really be like, yeah, and just like looking through the paper almost. So I'm not personally great at reading body language, but I use it as a cue to ask, you know, if they don't look normal, that's when I say, what's up?
Okay, let's go to now Tanya explaining about what happens after our meeting.
After your meeting, you've already told the client in the end what each of you is working on. Have a short meeting with your co-collaborator afterwards. It doesn't have to be an official meeting, just talk to them and make sure everybody's on the same page. So, you know, this is a great time to say, hey, you know, is this really the thing? Can you explain this to me? I don't quite understand. You know, something you weren't comfortable with saying during the meeting. And then once you're all on the same page and got that straight, the associate collaborator goes on the website, goes to the project, and fills out the initial meeting or subsequent meeting form. So this is really simple. It says, 1, how much time did you spend on the meeting for preparation for the meeting, that sort of thing. So you put your hours down. Both the lead and the associate hours can be put down for meetings. Don't, as an associate, if you're filling it out, don't worry about logging hours for the lead outside of the meeting. They can do that themselves. But for the meeting, you know how long they were there. You were there with them. So put that in. Then it's going to ask, what are the overall research goals for the project? Do not copy paste from their request. Don't do it. In your own words, put what the overall research goals are. Because a lot of times in their request, they're going to say, my overall research goals are determining how many people I need for this study. That is not their overall research goals. And you know, don't copy and paste that in.
Their overall research goal is figuring out if drug A or drug B is more effective at curing epilepsy because we want to cure epilepsy.
And then there's a section on, it's called comments or details. That's where you can talk about what you actually did. So we discussed with the client, we found out all their information about the project, and then we set up a plan so that we're going to learn some more about PCA and get back to them at the next meeting. That's what goes in the comments section. That's kind of the initial meeting kind of thing. You're also going to need to put down, I think there's a specific research question slot, where you put down, you know, what are you specifically doing? And that's for the initial meeting. The associate collaborator is expected to do that for the initial meeting. In between meetings, when you're doing work, you report your own hours on the website. And it's got a little drop down that says, you know, this is an initial meeting, this is a follow-up meeting, this is research, this is other. So, you know, for research, I went online and tried to figure out how to do R code to answer the client's research. If you have code, copy paste it in. There's also a section for attachments. So if you want to attach an R file, a SAS file, whatever, do it. And then you report your own hours. Your co-collaborator is going to do the same. They're going to report their hours. If they ask you to, be nice and do it if you have time. If you don't, tell them, you know, it's their own responsibility to report their hours. As you continue on, the associate's responsible for doing reports for meetings. At the very end, you're completely done with the client, you've solved their problems, there's something called a final summary. It's very similar to the initial project. So it's going to say, you know, what questions did you help answer? What methods did you use? A reflection on how the project went, what you learned from it, what you're going to do differently in the future, that sort of thing. Whether you think you did the work for co-authorship or you think it was just, you know, simple stuff, you don't need a co-authorship, you don't want acknowledgement, that sort of thing. And it's also got another section for comments and attachments. So feel free to attach whatever you want to. Make comments on, you know, what you did, that sort of thing. When you're done with that, you send an email to your lead. And if you're the lead, you'll get this email. Their job is to go through all of these summaries you've done for the whole project and verify that everything's right. So what Hong said is correct here. And verify that all of their hours are reported. They then close the project. If you're the lead on the project, it's really simple to close a project after you verify everything's right. If something's wrong, send a note back to your associate and say, hey, can you fix this? If it's just an hours thing, go ahead and report additional hours for yourself. And then on the main page, there's a little edit tab. You click that, you hit close, and then you hit save, and the project is closed. And that's how that works. Once it's closed, I send a feedback form to the client, and they say how they think it went. Sometimes that initiates the client to say, hey, you know, I'm not ready for this to be done yet. Can I talk to them some more? And I'm like, sure, go ahead. But the sooner we close projects, the more likely we are to get feedback. If you work on a project today and I don't send a feedback form until August, they're not going to respond. So, you know, if you work with them today and you're finished 2 weeks from now, close that project. They'll get a form, they'll fill it out. But if we wait until the end of the summer to send it to them, they're not gonna remember. They're gonna be like, oh, they did a good job, but that's all I remember. Or, I didn't think it was very helpful, but that's all I remember. So that's kind of the administrative side of things.
So in LISA, we get money from the various colleges and from the Vice President of Research and the Provost and the graduate school. And we need to report our hours and the number of clients that we help. And so it's very important for you to report all of the time you spend on a project. So if you spent a half an hour looking up how to explain PCA, or you looked up to figure out what something meant in their collaboration request, and then you spent an hour and 15 minutes in the meeting and the reflection with the lead collaborator, and then if you spend 15 minutes doing the project update on the website, report all of that time. That's 2 hours. And then additionally, if you spend an hour reading more about our code and then 3 hours coding, put down 4 hours, figuring out the R code. 4 hours. That's what you want, because we really need to report all of the hours we worked so that we get credit for that. And then also what Tanya said is, as soon as the project's done, close it so that we can get feedback. So we also want to get lots of feedback from our clients, both good and the bad, because if it's bad, then we can move immediately to figure out how to make it better. And if it's good, which it usually is, 95% of our clients have positive things to say about LISA after each project, then they're more likely to say those positive things, and we get to count that 80% of our clients responded and 98% of them said that LISA was helpful and they were satisfied. So we want you to report your hours and then close the projects when they're done so that we can get the feedback from the clients.
One clerical thing, the way numbers work. If you work 15 minutes, that's 0.25 hours. So everything on the website's in hours. So don't put 0.15. No. We report in quarter hours. So if you work 10 minutes, report it as 15. If you work 25, report it as 30. And 45 is obviously 0.75 hours. If you report some odd number, I will have to contact you to verify what that is. That takes a lot of time. Don't do it.
So if you work an hour and 5 minutes, just say an hour.
Yeah.
If you work an hour and 10 minutes, say 1.25 hours.
1.3 is not okay. 0.3 is not something.
Right. And that's on this, it's an associate collaborator checklist. We also have a checklist in the guide on page 9 for lead collaborators. And so you should read these after the qualifier. Okay, we're coming to the end of our meeting today. Are there other questions that have come up? Do you feel confident that you know what to do when you meet with your first LISA client? No. Okay. What are some of your hesitations? What are you
Because I've
concerned about?
never done this before, so I'm kind of like,
Okay.
what's gonna expect, you know?
Right.
Maybe because I did not really take that course.
I'm afraid. Yeah, so in your first meeting, so this is what we'll expect of you from your first meeting. You will be assigned with an experienced, to work as an associate collaborator with an experienced lead collaborator. Your responsibility will be what Tanya said about going to the website and filling out the overall research goals, their specific question, and your hours that you spent. So in the meeting, you should be responsible for summarizing their overall research goals. So say, okay, let me try to see if I understand what your research is about. You are trying to do an experiment on ducks' feet to see if the bigger the feet, the faster they swim. And then the client will go, well, actually no, it's actually on geese, which are similar to ducks. Okay, and it's not about their feet, it's actually about the length of their legs and the length of their feet. So it's that whole combined. Oh, okay. So you're trying to do this, you're trying to figure out, why geese swim. And the reason you're trying to do that is because you're going to develop a robot that swims like a goose. Like, yes, exactly. So when you summarize the client's research, we're looking for them to say exactly. But that rarely happens at first. At first they correct some mistakes, and then they'll add things like, oh yeah, actually something I didn't tell you is that it's something else. So they will. So you should be responsible for understanding their overall research goals by the end of that initial meeting. And when you are a LISA lead collaborator, and you have an associate who's working with you, and it's a new associate, you should take some time to then say, do you have any questions right now? Because a lot of times the associate collaborators are hesitant to ask a question. And so as a lead, it's good to pause and turn to them and ask if they have a question. Because they usually do, and the question is usually good. Like, it's usually an important thing. Because you have a different perspective than the lead on the project. If the lead doesn't, stop the meeting to ask you if you have questions, you should still ask your questions. And so one effective way is, if you're sitting, let's say you're sitting like this and you're listening, you're relaxed and you're comfortable, then if you ask a question, come up closer to the table. If you go like this, people are going to stop talking. And they'll look at you, and you ask, so I had a question, I was confused about this. Are you randomizing the order in which you test the geese? Or does that And how, like, oh, well, so definitely as an associate collaborator in your first meeting, ask some questions about the research to make sure that you understand the research and you can summarize it succinctly at the end of the meeting in the project update. And then you'll get more experience, and then kind of the goal will be by the end of the summer, you'll be a lead on a project, and you'll have an experienced associate collaborator to work with you. But you will be responsible for having the open conversation, the one-to conversation to conversation. Other questions or concerns? And I'm going to pause for a long time so that you can really say it. So you guys have other questions or concerns or stuff about how to act in your first LISA meeting?
Do you wear formal clothes?
Okay, question is what clothes do you wear? Do I wear formal clothes? I wear this every single day. It's like, work pants and a long sleeve shirt. Although in the summertime, I do have one short sleeve shirt that I wear. So that's my uniform. So when you're meeting with a client, you should, not formal clothes, but a little bit extra. Yeah, so not test-taking clothes, but like what Dr. Kazazuru is wearing is completely appropriate. A collared shirt. Although you can also get by, because you're grad students, so you should.
It's appropriate?
That's appropriate, yes. As grad students, you can wear like your fancy grad student attire, which for me was flip-flops, shorts, and a collared shirt. That's what I wore as a grad student. That was my, and they weren't dirty shorts, they weren't cut-offs, right? They weren't ragged. And everybody wore flip-flops. And it was summertime. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. What are you planning on wearing in your first meeting? Okay. But you have you don't have an idea. What kind of things do you think you might wear?
I don't know. It was just random question, because like when you work, it's like different than when you do research, right?
Right. Yeah. So it should be more of the work clothes than the research clothes.
I decided this morning that flannel was not appropriate. I originally had flannel, and I was like, let's upgrade. So that's better.
Other questions? And again, I'm going to pause for a long time.
So then with the power model, is it the lead collaborator that's sort of going through it and then the associate collaborator's job just to maybe make sure they cover anything and just sort of support them on that? Or are you both sort of switching off and going through it?
It's the lead that goes through it. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay.
And it's the lead that goes through it and the associate who's there to, pick up anything that got left behind. So,
All right.
so one thing is that it's never too late to have the time conversation, and it's never too late to have the one-to conversation. So, it could be 15 minutes before the scheduled hour and be like, oh, I never checked to see if this time still worked with you. Like, do you still have, 15 minutes available for this meeting? Do you have like another, extra 10 minutes if we were to go overtime? Like, it's appropriate at any time to have the time conversation, and also the one-to conversation. You say, all right, we've done a lot of this stuff, and I want to just back up and make sure that I understand what you want for the rest, for the remaining 20 minutes of this meeting. And what would you like to accomplish in the 20 minutes that we have left? Anything else?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there any minimum hour for a meeting? initial, whatever.
Is there a minimum for an initial meeting? I had a very effective meeting in 15 minutes, in which I understood the research question, paraphrased it, the guy's like, exactly, and then came up with a statistical solution that he understood how to implement. He's like, oh, okay, I got it. I'm gonna draw from these things, I'm gonna simulate this. This is how he was trying to calculate something, I'm like, here, you're gonna simulate it. That'll be your answer. And I explained what to do. He's like, awesome, I'm gonna do this, this, and this. Perfect, thank you very much. It totally is gonna answer my research question. So that was 15 minutes. That's the record that I've seen. So, to answer your question, there's no minimum, but what we don't want to see is you to spend a half an hour to understand their research and then say, okay, well, see you later.
Okay.
So spend that extra half an hour to be like, all right, now let's figure out like what's step one, what's step two, and we're not really sure about, if you're not sure, if you really are stuck, then say, well, okay, right now, no, what I would do is like, okay, I'm not sure if we should do this or this or this. And we could go our separate ways and we could figure this out on our own, or if you'd like to stay, I'm gonna Google these 3 things and we could like try to figure out what works. So I think an hour is a good time for an initial meeting, although 45 minutes is also good. But if you could do it in 15 minutes, awesome. If you do it in 14 minutes, let everybody know. Because you have the new record. Other questions?
Yeah, and therefore the maximum time is 2 hours.
Okay, maximum time is however long you can reserve the room for, and however long you think you and the associate collaborator will be effective, and the client will be effective. So I've had meetings that have lasted 2 hours. I've had meetings that have lasted 3 hours. So there's no maximum time. Although like with a 3-hour meeting, you have to take a break. I've had 2-hour meetings without a break, and we finished it at the end. And it was so much better. Like I'm so glad. And I asked like, how long? It's like, well, I don't have anything for the rest of the afternoon. Well, me neither, but I like to keep this under an hour and a half because otherwise, I'd start to get a little bit tired. But I finished it in 2 hours, and that was so much better than ending it at 1 hour and then having another meeting later, because it would have taken 2 other meetings later because we would have taken time to catch up. But we were able to just finish it and done, and that's the great thing. They walk away with their solution, they know how to do it, and you walk away knowing that it's done. Other questions? Do you have any questions, James?
I don't think I have any questions. I'm sure there's stuff I haven't considered. But actually, that initial meeting I had with you was very informative. I feel like, it's totally right. That first meeting, you just don't know what's going on. It's scary.
Just because you're inexperienced.
Yeah.
I feel it that way,
Right.
When you're inexperienced with anything, it's just that.
Yeah. And so you're going to get the experience.
Hopefully.
Well, you will. I guarantee you will get that experience. Have all of you signed up for the website?
Only Steven. Steven's
Okay.
completed everything.
Good job.
Okay, you guys should, at some point today, spend 5 minutes to sign up for the website.
It doesn't
Okay.
take that long. All
Okay.
you have to do is log in.
2 minutes, 1 minute
So,
to sign
like
up for the
30
website.
seconds, you just sign in your
Okay,
name.
30
your
seconds to
email.
sign up for the website. And then next week, do the other stuff. And then do you have your PID?
He does not yet.
Yeah.
It's still processing. It may be done now, but it wasn't before this meeting.
So what I'm going to do is, well, I'm going to send Tanya the links to a paper about type 3 errors and to Doug Zahn's first 8 chapters in his book about the power process, which I encourage you to read. So you should read all that. You don't have to read it. James has done it. I encourage you to read both the article and the chapters next week after the qualifier. And then Stephen, I encourage you to read it as well.
Extra material apart from this?
It's extra material apart from this. So also read this guide. Okay, so really, the guide could be expanded into a book. But, I'm leaving on my honeymoon today. And I've got other papers, So eventually this will become a book. And you're like, all right, this is a LISA book. Yeah. Okay. If there are no more questions, then good luck with your qualifiers, and see you guys later this summer. And was any decision made about the meeting on Thursday?
No.